Good morning. I would like to welcome you all here to this meeting this morning. And before we begin, just to highlight some housekeeping announcements. Please do not take pictures or make public tweets or videos. And it will just be the organizers who take pictures and videos. This is mainly in relation to the safety of our panelists. That said, good morning to all of you. Thank you for coming. So to begin this discussion, I would start by saying that it's important for us to remember how important a moment this is. And I think often in Human Rights Council negotiations and discussions and in the pace of things, this is something that might be left out, but this is a very, very important moment for Myanmar. There's been many calls for accountability and in the country over the past decades, and finally there is a more serious discussion taking place at the UN on looking at accountability into what has happened. I remember exactly 1 year ago, in the same September session last year, even as violations were taking place on the ground in Myanmar, it was a struggle to even have attacks, violations against civilians mentioned in the decision that the Human Rights Council was planning to take. There was much reluctance, and 3 or 4 years ago, Myanmar was hardly on the radar. And then we had all of these horrific things that have happened after that. So as we sit here today, following developments, it's important to remember that we have come a long way. But at the same time, it's also equally important to remember that it's very hard to celebrate any of this because this has come out of suffering and tragedies that have taken place on the ground. And there's much more still to be done in terms of international action on the situation. So with that, let's start this discussion with our panelists here. We have Wai Wai Nu with the Women's Peace Network, and we have Stella now, who's a Kachin activist, and we have Kinomar, who's with Progressive Voice. These will be our 3 panelists today. Of course, one of the most important topics of discussion for some time, and before I begin, just to repeat, please do not take pictures or videos if you're not with the organizers. So one of the most important discussions at this point is surrounding the findings of the fact-finding mission, which published a summary of its findings earlier. And this has obviously been a major point of discussion. It has been in the news and has provided a lot of impetus for further action on Myanmar. So in that context, maybe I would start with Wai Wai. You're also a Rohingya activist. What do you think about the fact-finding mission's findings published so far, the summary so far, and what has been the response to it, both from the government but also from civil society and victims, specifically in Rakhine State? Could you tell us about that?
Thank you so much, Inian, and thank you all of you for joining us today. My name is Wai Wai Nu. I am a Rohingya activist. I was born and raised in Rakhine, northern Rakhine State, where conflict is affected or where these clearance operations happened recently last year. So I've been in the field working as an activist and and doing a lot of groundwork with the youth and among youth and women, and documenting human rights violations, what's happened in Rakhine State. for 6 years since I was released from the jail in 2012. Throughout these years, we know what is happening in Rakhine State. We have tons of evidence and how these mass atrocities or how these persecutions is happening very systematically, widespread, and for a long time with state policy. But we were not there enough to mention the crimes as it is. In particular, we were not there enough, we were not able to mention or speak aloud as it is genocide. So the fact-finding mission report gave us some encouragement and basically the legitimacy to be able to say what it is, because otherwise, if we do so in the past, if we did, we were really afraid of like being kind of having even security threat inside the country domestically. But I think the report, it's come up very in a very nice way that how it's able to describe the crime as it is, while even many other human rights organizations are considering what would be political implications if they use the word genocide when we describe the crimes. But I think at this point we have to acknowledge, as fact-finding mission's report has come up, we have to acknowledge the crime as it is, regardless of your political institutions or human rights organizations, or even whatever you are working on. But it is the genocide, and it is crimes against humanity. With that, the community is very, very hopeful. They've been looking for the justice, for the accountability for a long time, for decades. Some of our people like for my grandma and our grandparents, they've been waiting for the justice and accountability for their entire life. So this report gives the hope for the community. And I think we really have to make sure the justice and accountability come into reality by having with this strong kind of opportunities at this point. And honestly, for me, since we have been working on doing advocacy and working advocacy by calling for ending impunity and asking for the accountability and justice for 6 years, for me, this is this is already late. If we were able to have some accountability, if we were able to end impunity since like 2013 or 14, after the first round of this atrocity happened in 2012, we might not see the about 1 million people losing their lives and properties, and have to flee from their home and living in dire conditions in refugee camps. So for me, it's already late. So we really need all of you to act immediately to really complete the accountability mechanism that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. So Stella, one part of the fact-finding mission's findings so far also look at northern Myanmar, particularly Kachin and Shan State. Could you tell us about what you think in respect to their findings on those parts, and what the response has been among the civil society and other actors in Kachin and Shan State?
Hello everyone, my name is Delano. I'm a human rights defender, and I write about conflict and human rights situation in the Kachin and Northern Shan State. So what the FFM report had come up with is really the reflection of what has been happening for decades to the community, to the ethnic minorities in Kachin and Northern Shan, as well as in other nationwide throughout Burma. As a human rights defender, I go and meet so many victims of human rights violation and/or their family members if the victims have been persecuted or have killed by the Burma army, the perpetrator. And it's so common to meet people, you know, I just meet them and then on my way back after a few days to learn that, oh, that person that you just had, you know, spoken to at the camp had been, you know, arrested or detained or killed in the war situation. And so this is like for the documentation, you know, presented by the FFM. This is nothing surprising, but then it was empowering in a way that, you know, what has been happening to the communities for a decade is for the first time being presented to the world through the mandate from the Human Rights Council, the creation of FFM. So this is something that the community have been waiting for so long. And then when I speak to the community, the survivors or victims or witnesses to the horrific human rights violation that took place in Kachin and Northern Chan, they always said one thing in common, that I cannot sleep or I don't want to die before I see the people responsible for these crimes. Because one woman that I met who witnessed who was or still is the neighbor of the house, the two teachers, the KBC teacher were raped and killed by the Burma Army 2015. This old lady, poor old lady, she was paralyzed after a few months of the crime taking place. She couldn't live with the trauma of that crime. And so she said, I don't want to die. She's already very old. In her late 60s, but then she said, I don't want to die before, you know, seeing this through like all until the end, because I know who did it, and then there is so much guilt that for something that she had nothing to do with, and that made her like bad, you know, bad sick, and then went into paralyzed for months. So the Kachin community worldwide, and also people on the ground in Kachin and Shan State, they have in one single united voice, they had come up with statement letter publicly. They said, we believe that the military must be held accountable for the crimes of which it is accused through the transparent and accountable international mechanisms, up to and including International Criminal Court or an ad hoc special criminal tribunal. And so this is the response from the community, and from most importantly from the witnesses and also the survivors of the human rights violation. And I will end my notes on the FFM, and then we'll go into a bit more detail when I have the opportunity about the up-to-date situation about the Kachin and Shan. Thank you.
Thank you. Burma, so we've heard about the response from the communities, from the victims in both Rakhine as well as northern Myanmar. What has actually been the response of the government, and also what do you think about the report? But also, can you tell us a little bit about how the government has responded to these findings so far?
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before I get into that, I also want to share my personal reflection. I've been a human rights activist for the last 30 years. This year marks 30 years. And I've been coming to Geneva, engaging with this platform for the last 20 years. And I come all the time, every year, and many of my colleagues, even the young generation activists ask, how could you even do that? Like, non-stop, consistently. I've been doing that is because I know this Burma military regime from the past and moving on to the current one will not stop this impunity unless the international community actually take the concrete action to stop their impunity. So saying that, I'm very pleased to see the fact-finding mission coming with the very concrete and strong recommendations, because they all reflect the ground reality where the people in our country have to go through. So now I want to actually share with you what are the other responses. I want to start with let me start with the government reaction, of course, to the report. I mean, we all can already expect and imagine what they will say. It's always been a total denial. And that total denial from the past 20, 30 years continued to be up until now under the leadership of the State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. that total denial actually now, of course, come to be more with the different entities taking their stand publicly. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement, which is, of course, the Foreign Minister is Aung San Suu Kyi herself, denouncing the FFM report, but also the two largest parties, National League for Democracy and also the USDP, they also denounced. There are some key political actors, also the military elites also have the different denouncing of the report on their Facebook, for example. But also interesting is something happened right just a week before the report was released. We all know that the report will be released. There was the Karen community from across the country and also those who are still displaced along the border area in Thailand. They issued a statement calling for the Myanmar referral to ICC. And then, interesting enough, is State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi actually approached. She summoned the Karen MPs from her party, as well as the ethnic affairs ministers, to convince the Karen community to denounce that statement, to denounce the statement issued by the Karen community from worldwide, calling for the ICC referral. But also the timing was actually made to make sure because this FFM report was coming out. And so far, in Karen state, Yangon and Irrawaddy division, the Karen community, religious leaders, like literature and cultural affairs communities, they've been approached. There is a statement where they are asked, do you want to see the action taken against the military, the Tatmadaw? The answer is to tick the box, yes or no. The 21 community leaders already signed on without really knowing. Also, there was an intimidation because they said if you don't denounce it, the ICC is going to disturb the peace process, nationwide ceasefire agreement. There will be an attack on the Karen community. That was a direct threat coming. And therefore, some people actually got worried and signed on. There are also a lot of discussion that people are being asked to mobilize to actually stand against and denounce the fact-finding mission report. We don't know whether that is really going to come actually in place, will take place or not. And then just like very quickly, the media, the Burmese media also was that they've been a part of this whole hate speech campaign against the Rohingya and Muslim community, and they are also denouncing the report. But interesting enough is the public reaction is different a little bit. On the social media, there's been very aggressive, attacking the international community and the human rights defenders and Rohingya activists and all of this. Somehow, after the fact-finding mission report, that actually got not as aggressive as before. And it could have been also, if you notice it, because on the same day the fact-finding mission was released, the writers actually reported on the Tatmadaw, the military, using the fake photos when it comes to the Rohingya situation. And there is also the fact the Facebook actually took down about 20 accounts, including the Commander-in-Chief. So that actually gave a complete shock to the people in the country, and that reaction was for people to kind of sit back and think what is really happening. So I think that is where the current moment situation. And there are 51 civil society organizations signed on a letter to the Human Rights Council to calling on the council to adopt a resolution in line with the fact-finding mission's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have had these initial findings from the fact-finding mission, and they have been shocking, and we've heard the responses from the victims and also the denial from the government. So after all this, I would like to ask the panelists the next question, and maybe start with you, Wai Wai. What actually is the current situation now on the ground, and also especially in Rakhine and also across the border in Bangladesh? What is this current status?
Yeah, just before I'd like to mention about the fact-finding missions a little bit, that this is the first time that we're seeing over these 6 or 7 years that we have been gaining, as sympathy and support from the larger Burmese society, across different ethnic groups. It is also because, as Mauma has said, social media become less aggressive against the Rohingya community itself, and the fact-finding response to the fact-finding mission report. And we realize this is because the fact-finding mission's mandate has broadened to the Kachin and Northern Shan situations. So people have started to realize that what is happening in Northern Shan or Shan state or Kachin state or in other ethnic area, it's somehow similar to the Rohingya communities are sharing similar conditions. So they find they can see like similarity or commonality among across the persecutions and discriminations against the ethnic and religious minority. So this is very important for all of us to keep in mind, that when we talk about accountability in Burma, it is very important to recognize and always push for the accountability for the whole country, entire nations, across the ethnicities, because almost all minorities and a lot of the people in the country has been facing similar persecutions by the same perpetrators for decades. So we shared our suffering. So this is why it is important that we call for the accountability for the whole nation. And talking about current situation, despite of the discussions going around accountability here in Geneva and with the different calls, the situations in the ground has been remained the same. It's very dire. Although about 800,000 people had to flee from home in Rakhine to Bangladesh, there are remaining populations in Rakhine state. Their conditions is the same as before. The IDPs in central Rakhine and in Sipdui, where about 130,000 IDPs are kept, they are still remain in the IDP camps without having any proper livelihood support, without having any basic rights, including still right to move freely from one camp to another camp or one village to another village, or even getting right to get basic health care or go into the hospital or getting education. So this is the situations of the IDPs in central Rakhine and Sipdui. But in northern Rakhine state, people are really having in a situation that there is no security at all. If they go outside of their village, or even in the village, if they go out of their home, they can be attacked by the Rakhine or by the government, by the authorities like military or other security forces. So the record of this arson attack or extrajudicial killing or disappearance has been happening every day. So it's in northern Rakhine state. There is no security, and also there is no other kind of basics rights has been restored to them. For example, I was talking about my grandmother because it is very personal to me. My grandmother is 85 years old, and she has very deep-rooted connection to her village called Budapin in Budidong, which is the village of our ancestors. All of our grandparents, even their cemetery is there. So she is the one who really cares us, and I have very strong connection with her. And she never, when we moved to Rangoon and when her children go abroad, she never, when we asked her to come up from the Rakhine state and stay with us, and she would always respond that, I don't want to leave my land, I don't want to leave my home. But this is the time that she said, please bring me anywhere you can, I don't want to stay here anymore. So mean that she cannot go to the hospital, although she has been suffering this health problem severely, and there is no basics right in Rakhine State at all, and there is no security. So I think this is very important, that accountability is important for them to have a sustainable solution for a long time to prevent recurrence of the crimes. However, we also still have to focus about immediate protections of the people, immediate insurance of their basic rights, and work on the long-term solutions and restorations of their rights.
Thank you. Stella, you work on a region where there's a live conflict going on. Can you tell us what the current situation is?
Sure, that's what I'm here for, and I have a few photos and some statements issued by the government. So as the world's attention and the national attention was focusing on the upcoming 21st Century Bangalore Conference in early July, what we witnessed was the killing of 6 female medics from the Daang National Liberation Army. The Burma Army accused the Daang National Liberation Army as perpetrator. However, these female medics were killed in captivity. They were prisoners of war taken by the Burma Army. And then the body that were buried, later unearthed by the villagers, found the signs on their body, the signs of rape and torture. It's not surprising for us to hear and learn about these things, because these things happen all the time in ethnic areas. However, this was going under very was going unnoticed by many in international community because of the 21st Century Panglong Conference, led by the State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi. What this means, it's very important that we really look into the true nature of what's happening with the peace process. It is stalled. It's a window dressing for the army, backed by the Aung San Suu Kyi. Before she came into power, she said, no one should sign the NCA, Nationwide Ceasefire Agreement. However, as soon as she came into power, the tone changed. She asked everyone, all the non-state armed groups, 24 of them, to sign the Nationwide Ceasefire Agreement. In the meantime, what the army, this is the Northern Commander, a few weeks after he was appointed, he said, we will ensure rule of law. If anything is against this, we will remove it. When they said rule of law, that means the army's rule. That's why when Aung San Suu Kyi kept saying, there must be rule of law and people should have trust in rule of law, she's implying it's the army, because we have not seen any attempt to amend constitution or any unjust laws. And so the Daang National Liberation Army, whose 6 female the DNLA is a member of non-signatory to the Nationwide Ceasefire Agreement. And so another, the Kachin KIA, Kachin Independence Army, also being another non-signatory to the Nationwide Ceasefire Agreement. The people from the Kachin community continue to experience thousands of displacement. Just in April, more than 3,000 people trapped in the jungle without any food or water. People died from a lack of access to food. And until now, after more than 3 months, there are more than 100 people still trapped, and the army blocked their way out of the jungle. So basically the reasoning, the logic for the army, they have made it very clear in the local media that the reason there is an ongoing military offensive is because they haven't signed the NCA. These ethnic armed organizations have not signed the nationwide ceasefire agreement. However, if we look at those members to the nationwide ceasefire agreement, Saw Umu, a human rights defender, environmental worker and humanitarian aid worker, he is a member of Karen community. And the Karen KNLA and KNU, Karen National Union, they have signed, they were in the first batch of signing the nationwide ceasefire agreement in October of 2015. And he was killed on April 9, 2018, and the body is still with the army. The army refused to return the armies, citing that Saw Umu is a member of the KNLA, the Karen army. What is the point? Because KNLA has already signed the ceasefire agreement. And also the another aspect very important that we have to pay attention to is that with the linking to the ceasefire agreement and the peace process is the humanitarian crisis that's taking place. Since the aid cut in 2016 of May, the more than 50,000 people in the non-governmental control area or the Kachin independent organizations control area, they relied on the aid, the assistance from the faith-based religious local organization. And these organizations, particularly and including the Kachin Baptist Convention, they were issued, this is the letter statement issued by the Kachin State Minister for Border Affairs and Security. He is saying, we know you're going to you have been going to the KIO area, and then if you continue those activities, you will be arrested and charged with the Unlawful Association Act, the colonial act created by the British in 1908. And so this is what the people all in the areas whose respective ethnic armed groups have signed or not signed to the nationwide ceasefire agreement. That's why we have to understand that there is no peace process despite hundreds of millions of dollars going into the peace process. The peace process has only further enabled and legitimized the atrocity committed by the Burma army in the recent years, especially since 2011. That will be my update from this mission.
And Omar, could you perhaps also tell us about the situation in the country, specifically in terms of extremism, which was on the rise, and in terms of how the majority is also looking at this, what's happening on the ground?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we all come together at this point with the Facts-Finding Mission's recommendations. I think I'm also hoping that all of us are in the mood of taking action. So I'm going to be naming some people, hoping that some of you, even within your own capacity as an individual or as an organization and institutions and entity, as such, will be able to take some action so that we all help support the people of Burma to be able to address this accountability and justice. So I'm going to actually introduce you to the latest response from one of the leading religious leaders, Cardinal Charles Wu. The Vatican issued an article which in Cardinal Charles Wu said, extreme terms like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and sanctions will not assist us in our journey towards peace and democracy. And then he says, he not open new ones. So here is a question to the Vatican. Why would they actually publish such article, in his name? Because Cardinal Charles Wu on the ground, his comments created a lot of resentment including from the Christian community, particularly the youth activists. Because as the religious leader, he should be taking side for the truth and for the healing of the victims, not the perpetrators. So this is something I would like to call on your attention, saying that I want to move on. What is really happening in our country is an appetite. It's been happening for a long time. The state policy targeting the ethnic and religious minorities, persecution, and wiping whole or some part of the community, identity, culture, and literature and all has been happening for a long time. So this is the Facts-Finding Mission's finding is really reflecting what is really happening and what we really need to address on the ground. So you have to understand that Myanmar military, the Burma Army or the Tatmadaw, the 2008 constitution that they have drafted is not only for them to hold on to power, but it is in favor of one ethnic community and one religious community, which is Burma and the Buddhist. And that's who I belong to. I am Burma, I am Buddhist. Being the majority in this country, I know how exactly the government and the policy and the institutions and structures all are entrenched to further marginalize and persecute the minorities, as we all kind of call them. Myanmar has gone through the peaceful transition to democracy, which is not the case for the situation on the ground. So I just want to show you this. At the moment, particularly the Muslim minority across the country, not only the Rohingya people, but Muslim minority across the country are facing so much challenge when it comes to their citizenship. Many of them are being now questioned about their citizenship, and their IDs are given in a very kind of weird name of their race, such as, for example, in one of these ID cards says this young boy is being labeled of his ethnicity as the like a Muslim Burma, and there are a few others mixed. So there is a whole situation of the mixed blood people are being facing. Even those in the past who received the ID card in a very simple way of their ethnic identity has now been come into a very complication. So as long as you are Muslim, you are asked where your bloodline comes. Are you mixed? Whether your forefathers come from Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, you must have come from one of those as long as you are Muslim. Even though I'm a Burma, let's say if I convert to Islam now, then I will be actually asked, my forefather must have come from one of these countries. So there's a huge problem with the community when it comes to citizenship, when it comes to their national ID cards. But then I have this one photo for you that I want you to see. Look at it, because this is the reality and daily life of particularly the Muslim community from the Rakhine. Not only the Rohingya, there are other Muslim communities such as Kaman. And the Kaman community, for example, there is a whole restriction on their freedom of movement. Their travel being restricted for so long. So when they try to come outside of outside of Rakhine, so basically they've been detained, arrested. More than 400 Kaman Muslim Rakhine being arrested and detained. So I want to move very quickly to this nationalist organization called Mabata. You need to understand that this organization is a third largest mass organization in our country, following the military party and Aung San Suu Kyi's political party. This is the third largest. And how it is third largest is basically also because they are a part of the military, being backed by the military and military cronies, elites, both politically and financially. You can see the leading monk, leading Mansayam, someone in the army officers, killing non-Buddhists is not as sinful. If you kill more like 1.5 million people, non-Buddhists, it's sort of like killing 1.5 people, and therefore it's not as sinful. See, that is something is so dangerous happening in our country. And then there's another monk named Wirathu. Oops, something happened. Then someone like Wirathu said the Muslims have no place in our country. So saying that, okay, I just want to show you the map so that you can see how entrenched this nationalist organization is. 270 out of 330 townships across the country, Mabata has their branches and strongholds. Okay? And then they use the propaganda by all of these social media means. Because Facebook has taken some actions, the Buddhist monk Wirathu, he actually started to use also the radio, internet radio. So basically, nowadays, because of Facebook, many of them are very careful of what they write on their social media, but also they started to use a very informal code words that will allow them to come together and mobilize. If they call a demonstration, they can end up 10,000 people very easily, or up to 20 and 30,000 very easily. When the human rights activists try to hold a demonstration, even like we get into a few hundreds, there is a whole immediate crackdown from the police and from the government. So that's where the situation is. And you can see that they are affiliated, there are many proud seats within the society who are backing these nationalist organizations. Also the armed groups, but also the political parties. 29 political parties are supporting them. And just very quickly, this is what they do on the ground. They declare their Muslim-free zones in many parts of the country. At least 27 townships or villages been declared, where also they actually take actions against the Muslim and the Christian who are trying to have a prayer, have a worship places that's been disturbed and physically attacked by them. And this is the last slide that I want to bring your attention. Any of you who can take an action in your hand, please do. Because this beauty queen is actually has the follower of 500,000 people in the country. And she was dethroned last year because she was spreading the hate speech against the Rohingya people. And now she's come back to the screen, to the international scene. She will be contesting in Poland at the supranational contest or whatever that is called that I'm not familiar with. But in December, she will be contesting. And this is kind of like, it's not like a regular contesting. This is orchestrated and well planned to revenge the international community, where she will be representing the Rakhine State and Myanmar as a whole to tell the world of what is the real story is. So that's all I'm going to end. This is where things are at the moment in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So I'll maybe quickly ask the panelists to tell us, well, we've heard about the report and the response on the ground. We've heard about the situation. There's little movement and there's a lot of denial from the government. So in the face of all this, maybe I'll start with you, Wai Wai. What do you think the Human Rights Council and the UN should do?
Thank you, Inian. I think Human Rights Council initiative this year, the resolution, it's really great, and I just want to make sure that the resolutions reflect reality and victims' voices. When we talk about accountability, justice and accountability, I've been talking to the community. I've been talking to the community quite some time, and for them, yes, for a lot of them, their justice for the lost one, their family members, and their lost properties is very important. They want the Myanmar generals going to the ICC. But on the other hand, when we kind of sense overall community, what does justice mean for the community? It's actually equality and dignity in the country. They feel like they've been in these situations because they're being treated unequally and they are persecuted because of their identity. When I say equality and dignity, mean they have life in an equal status in the country, in Burma, with full citizenship, with equal citizenship, and being treated equally like other people in the country. So that is the most important, and I really want to make sure that the resolution should be reflecting those reality. And on the other hand, at the same time, resolution should make sure in the repatriation sections that they have the government of Myanmar granting 3 things to the community, which is first of all security, so they have a secure environment that they will be able to go back in Rakhine, precondition that the security is ensured, and their land, the lost properties and their land will be returned to them, and they will be able to go back to their original houses or villages. Not necessarily they will be kept in the temporary camp for long term. So there is a fear among the refugees that if they go back to the country, they will be kept in the so-called temporary camps or transition camps, where there is no plans by the government to rebuild the Rohingya villages and no plan to return their lands. And at the same time, they're selling those lands to the private sector as ownerless land in Rakhine State. And thirdly, make sure that there is no sections around the NVC, National Verification Card, which is creating more vulnerability to the community. So the people are really afraid of being forced to hold NVC card, National Verification Card, which is not any pathway or any way to the citizenship, which is in fact degrading their status, becoming non-citizens, and consequently losing all their land. So holding NVC card is the one of the most important thing for the refugee is to be able to come back. And I would also want to see the recommendation has included sections on the trust fund, which is recommended by the FFM report. When I was in the Bangladesh in refugee camps for 2 times, as each time 2 weeks, I have witnessed that the need for the psychosocial support and medical care for the victims, mostly victims of sexual violence. They've been they face this sexual violence, and a lot of them have the consequences on their physical, like some of them broken their arms or their back, or there are so much trauma among them. This has to be come up with a strong medical support and psychosocial support, and trust fund should include the educational support, which is again livelihood support for the refugee for long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Stella.
As Inian, you mentioned at the beginning that until 3 years ago there was no discussion going on in Burma, and so finally there is a momentum here, and then we must keep pushing because they're like to end the impunity, decade-long war crimes and crimes against humanity in Kachin and Shan, and also in other ethnic areas, and genocide against the Rohingya community in Burma. And to end all this once and for all, we have the opportunity. The opportunity in the midst of the crisis is for Human Rights Council to ensure there is an independent and international accountability mechanism to hold the perpetrators accountable. And also what the PowerPoint slides from the Ma'uma said about the Cardinal Bo, as a Kachin Catholic, he is not representing the voices, the victims of his constituents on the ground that I have spoken to, hundreds of them. So many people, they all have one voice in common who were first-hand victims or witnesses to these atrocities. They said, we want to see accountability and we want to see the perpetrators punished, and I will live to see through this. And so Cardinal Bo does not represent that. And also in terms of how could he say that in the midst of how the restriction and oppression on freedom of religion and belief is that because so many Christians, for instance, in the past Christmas, so many Christians were, the authority issued statement letter saying the Christians' houses cannot come together for prayer service because you might disrupt the harmony. And so that was the statement letter issued by the authorities, and that in the midst of that, for Cardinal Charles Bo to come out and say that it's unacceptable and he does not reflect and represent the situation on the ground. And also lastly about the draft resolution, to quickly touch upon it, is that it still lags unfortunately, and that should be paid attention to, is that at the moment the ethnic communities, either members of the signatory to the NCA, to the peace process or not, they are blocked and restricted from having political discussion, which will dictate their future. Because we talked about federalism, Aung San Suu Kyi talked about federalism, even the army talked about federalism, but everything we have seen so far is to further centralize the system in the country. And so the groups that have ethnic groups and ethnic respective armed groups, they have signed the NCA, but then they have been several times blocked from having political discussion. And all these 24 ethnic armed organizations cannot come together to have political discussion. And then the countries, our neighboring countries, have intervened, their authorities have intervened directly to stop any political discussion from having. So that would be my the input to the council's draft resolution, because we still have time, it's never too late, and then we need to pay attention that there has to be an open discussion among the community to dictate and to determine how their future should be. If we're to support federalism and decentralization, and this is not what's happening, and then you need to get on this. Without you, this will not happen in Burma. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar.
Lastly, of course, we already stressed that we would like to see the resolution really in line with the facts-finding mission's recommendations. Saying that, there is one particular recommendation that we really would like to see addressed reflect in this resolution, or the council to actually adopt it, is the review of the UN involvement in our country. Like I said, I've been engaged in this platform for the last 20 years with the frustration every single time. Also because when the country was closed down, I was right outside of the country, across the border, in the border area. We worked so hard at the risk to get the information out of the country to bring to the UN and international community. UN agencies have a lot more information than we do, including those rights abuses for ages, decades. And yet, this information will never come to be in light to bring the real change in our country. So that's one thing. At the moment, as I talk about this nationalist movement is really rising and entrenching in the country, UN agencies also have to deal internally, including not only their operations, but also their staffs. Many of the staffs are actually with a nationalist attitude towards the minorities. So, including the UN agencies, INGOs, when they actually hire the local people, what kind of principle and standard, and these needs to be reviewed and make sure that they are in line with the human rights principles. Otherwise, the UN agencies are taking double standard in our country that is going to further and have actually exacerbated the human rights problems on the ground to some extent already. That needs to be really reflected. So we really want to support this facts-finding mission's call for the review within the UN system, and we want to see the OHCHR and the human rights organs of the UN body to take more proactive role to ensure that all the operations in the country are in line with the human rights principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, tomorrow we will have the presentation from the fact-finding mission, and we hope to see perhaps more details emerging from the initial summary that was released, and there will be a lot more discussions to follow, and of course we are hoping that eventually out of this council session there would be at least an independent mechanism set up to collect and preserve evidence that may disappear very quickly if action is not taken immediately. I think we unfortunately don't have much time because we're already at 11 and the next group is already here. So thank you all. Is there, please Andrew, very quickly.
Yeah, just to say, the report, the full report, which is going to be about 430 pages long, will be available from 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And then there is a side event with the 3 experts at the fact-finding mission tomorrow afternoon at 2. So.
Thank you. That's Andrew from the Fact-Finding Mission Secretariat. Thank you for that. And with that, thank you all for coming to this side event. Thank you.